on the list, and then we're out of here by 7:30.
And Eric's 3.
Yeah.
Hey, Shayla. Shayla, we're going to wave when we leave. Oh, I so wanted to text you when that woman was talking about, you know, sex ed.
She laughed so hard. I sent a click and I was like, is there a curriculum I'm not aware of? I would love to consider the teacher during this lesson. He laughed.
It was pretty funny. You guys get your speech already?
What?
Get your speech already.
No.
What's up? Oh, he's on yet. You and I.
There's too much staff.
Yes, he said they're given.
Yeah, so, again, that's not the case, but, again, you know, when you've got, third line, so there is all new pencils and stainless steel tables.
That's all stuff for right here. Just hang out. Well, if you were a principal, why wouldn't you make an assistant principal?
Oh, so that's what I deserve it all.
You love that on total this one? You guys take shifts? Yes. I might skip one. You're putting Hessler on. Somebody's screen went far. Huh? Screen went far.
24 or 48.
What?
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Monday, November 16th, 2020 meeting of the MSAD 6 Board of Directors. Mrs. Smith, would you please call the roll?
Certainly. Julie Anderson.
Present?
Lindsay Atkinson. Present. Julie Bruni.
Here.
Nathan Carlo.
Present.
Erica Kreutz.
Here.
Robert Deacon.
Here.
Ellen Dakotas.
Here.
Trevor Hustis.
Present.
Donald Marine.
Here.
James Moses. Here. John Sargent.
Here.
Elizabeth Forestieri.
Here.
Ava DeRier.
Excused.
Shayla Harriman.
Here.
You do have quorum with 11 votes present.
Thank you very much. Would you all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'll accept a motion to approve the agenda. Moved by Mr. Carlo, seconded by Mr. Sargent. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? It is unanimous. We have no public comment this evening, so I'll turn the floor over to our student representatives for their report.
Okay, so for Bonnie Eagle High School, our girls cross-country team was disappointed that their state championship meet was canceled due to COVID concerns from the state. The girls were scheduled to race on Thursday, November 12th, and prepared for that very race since June. Many girls set PRs this season. In the regional meet, they placed first, beating out supposed competition from Falmouth. The girls cross-country was seeded number 1 in the state for what would have been a third consecutive girls Class A state title. Remy Levin won the girls Class A state golf championship. The class of 2022 is preparing to start a 12 Days of Christmas calendar raffle. NHS is looking forward to connections this year, whether it be from the past or with people who are currently in our lives, and they have a couple of ideas in mind to kick that off. Math team had its second regional meet on November 4th. The BE newspaper, the Bonnie Eagle Times, is currently working on their late November issue. They are working on multiple exciting pieces, including fall sports events, the outlook on winter sports, profiles on exchange students, more reviews, movie reviews, and even the upcoming drama play. The high school is now offering a free second chance breakfast for students who prefer to eat later in the morning. Picture retakes are tomorrow and Thursday this week. And this week is Geography Awareness Week. For the middle school, they are underway with their Pluck a Feather and Feed a Friend program. They are asking families to pluck a feather, buy the item listed on the feather, and donate it to us for our Thanksgiving baskets that we will fill. We are helping 11 families this year by providing them with a full Thanksgiving basket with all of the fixings. The Community Service Club has created a wall to honor the veterans on our BEMS staff and the veterans in a BEMS staff member's family. It is a great tribute to the BEMS family veterans. And the 7th and 8th grade Student Council and the Community Service Club are joining forces to sponsor a food drive for our local food pantries. They will be collecting non-perishable canned and boxed food goods and personal hygiene in need as the winter season sets in. The drive will begin on Monday, November 16th and end on Thursday, December 10th.
So for Buxton Center Elementary School, the November activity calendar has returned, and its Wear Flannel Plaid Day started the month off on November 3rd and November 5th. Students were encouraged to remember Veterans Day on November 11th. Friday, November 13th was World Kindness Day. Even though students were not in school, it was a day for Buxton Center Elementary School to show your pride and wear green and white, or any B.E. Scott swag. Saturday, November 14th was National Diabetes Day, where they wore blue wherever they were. Data Days for Teachers were held on November 9th and November 10th, and the third one is planned for November 16th. Student dismissal continues to go very well with parent pickup. We have certainly sped up the process. Students continue to adhere to wearing their masks. We have little, if any, difficulties with students wearing their masks. We are proud of our students who are working hard, whether by hybrid learning or all remote learning. Some upcoming events include the virtual turkey trot on Saturday, November 21st, the food drive during the week of November 16th at Buxton Center, and parent-teacher conferences are held November 17th and 19th. At HB Emory Elementary School, there was Picture Retake Day last week. Parent-teacher conferences are going to be held during the week of November 17th and 19th. The PTL also held a virtual book fair through Scholastic Book Fairs. Steep Falls Elementary School had Picture Retake Day as well. They held parent-teacher conferences last week, November 9th and 12th. Students are doing an excellent job with the new safety protocols in place. At Edna Libby Elementary, life-taught pictures were taken and students got them back last week. Parent-teacher conferences are also going to be held this week. Students decorated feathers for our turkeys in the school hallways, and Edna Libby is wishing you all a happy Thanksgiving. There are parent-teacher conferences on Tuesday and Thursday at Hollis Elementary, and the Hollis PTC is doing a turkey in disguise contest. Jen Pinkham is having classrooms help put our gardens to bed. At Georgie Jack, students completed DRA reading assessments, and the students and staff are also diving into the Positivity Project, where they focus on the character strength of bravery this past week.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions or comments for our student representatives? Seeing none, I'd like to turn the floor over to Mr. Curtis for an update on the athletic and activities programs at the high school.
Hey guys, thank you. I've invited some people in with me. Shayla, thanks. She gave part of my presentation for me. We should have coordinated a little better. So, is the screen coming on? It says it's shared. There we go. Maybe. Well, let me try again. Why do we get a new system the day of? It did. We connected earlier. Yeah. You're so funny. All right. It's not coming up. Yeah, I'm glad we connected early. Girls, can you guys hear me on the screen? Okay. So I invited people in. Obviously, you can't see them on the screen. But I wanted to share a little bit about our fall. Was that me, Lori? Were you pointing? Oh, a Google Meet setting? Mike, is there something I need to change? Settings? Video?
Makes me feel better.
Video for a sec. All right. So anyways, I can start sharing. The young ladies on the screen are the varsity members of our cross country, which aren't on your screen. I apologize. But I wanted them to kind of hear what I had to say. As Shayla said, I want to give you an overview of our fall sports. Obviously, we know with this time of COVID, it was kind of scary, kind of nerve-wracking to offer activities, but on the same hand, trying to balance out the mental well-being of our students, I think I feel, when I look at the whole fall season, was worth it. And I invited people in to kind of talk about this. Our girls cross-country team, as Shayla said, got the news Monday night that their season was over. And it was kind of devastating. So for the kids, they'd been working all year or all fall towards this. And what you may not know is our girls cross country team, this would have been a third state title for them. It would have been the first time in Bonnie Eagles history of a three-peat, which is a pretty impressive feat because our girls cross country team, there they are, has won 6 of the last 8 state titles for girls. The juniors and seniors in this group have been ranked number 1, as Shayla said, for the last 3 years, every single year. They did beat Falmouth in the regionals. Falmouth is obviously a very good team, and it's not any given that we would have beaten them at the state meet, but I feel pretty confident our girls would have because we were the favorites. And as I said, these young ladies got the news that their season was over on Monday. I can tell you, in my eyes, these young ladies are still state champs. And they would have been state champs had we run the race on Saturday. On Tuesday, after watching the disappointment in these girls, on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, they showed up for practice and continued to work hard even though their season was over. They weren't going to have the opportunity. So in my eyes, that's a state champion. And had we not had a fall season, had we taken the easy route and canceled and things like that, these girls wouldn't have been given that opportunity to participate all fall and hopefully given the chance to win states. So as Shayla said, these guys, the juniors and seniors, ranked number 1 for 3 straight years. They have not lost to a main school in 3 years. Okay, and next year we return all but 1 senior. So obviously next year we'll the favorites again, right, Liz? So I just wanted to have an opportunity to say this publicly for our girls. And I've got a couple other people here with me. You guys want to stand up? My second person here is Hayley Coons. Hayley is a senior member of our girls soccer team. And because we were another season that kind of ended in disappointment because on Friday before we were supposed to play on Saturday and Monday, I had to go up and tell the girls that they had to go into quarantine for a week and a half, 2 weeks, because we played a school that had a positive COVID test. All of our girls went through quarantine, no issues, but their season was cut short as well. But Hayley, by having a season this year, Hayley became the all-time girls Bonnie Eagle goal scoring record. She set the record for most career goals in Bonnie Eagle history. And had we not had a season, she obviously wouldn't have been able to do that. Little side note, Hayley is signing her national letter of intent tomorrow to attend Bryant University on a full athletic scholarship, which is pretty impressive. And then the last person I invited in was Remy Levin. Remy is a junior on our golf team, and Remy is the first Bonnie Eagle individual state Class A golf champion. Okay? So again, we've had golf in the individual championship goes back to 1987. 33 years we've never had an individual champion, and Remy became our first individual champion because we had a fall season. And I point these things out. We had a lot of great memories in the fall, and obviously it was not what we wanted. It was not what we are used to. There were no fans and things like that, but it did give the kids an opportunity to compete and gave them a chance to have somewhat of a normal fall as best we could. It wasn't easy, and I'll share some of the procedures and protocols, but I brought up these 3 examples because in my eyes, it made it worth it. Like I said, it was difficult at times, but it did make it worth it for that. So before I get into the other things, I don't know if we can give these guys a round of applause or congratulations. Okay.
Before you continue, Mr. Curtis, if I could just say a few words. The COVID-19 pandemic has uprooted all of our lives in more ways than one. The resiliency of our Bonnie Eagle athletes is truly impressive, and I do want to congratulate all of you, Coach Burleson and the girls cross country, Coach Levin and Remy, and you as well, Hayley, for your outstanding seasons. And you truly do make Bonnie Eagle proud. And for the girls cross country team, I do want to correct Mr. Curtis. I heard that you crushed in regionals, not just beat them, just completely crushed them. So you definitely were the favorites going into the state championship, and I'm sure I speak for all my colleagues here when I say in our eyes you are the Class A champions once again. You truly represent the best of our school district, and I congratulate you all on your season. Despite all of the challenges that the pandemic has presented us, you've done your school proud.
Thank you, sir.
Deacon.
Thank you. Some of you may know that I have a long civil rights background, and I always take great pride that Title IX has given so many young women opportunities. And I, as a member of this board, I appreciate that as team members, you learn a lot about yourself playing sports. You develop your skills in dealing with others as well as your physical skills. You obtain opportunities to get scholarships to advance your education. And sports just helps make you overall a better person. You find good people that are good friends for your life. And I want to thank you for all your hard work. Despite your disappointment, your participation in sports is something that you will appreciate long after your Bonnie Eagle years are completed. And I thank our coaching staff and others that have helped make our athletic program what it is and provide our athletes, both men and women, but in this instance, our women's teams, so many opportunities in life to go ahead. Congratulations on all you've done. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, so thank you guys. As I said, I'm going to share with you a little bit of what we did and a little bit more about each team. Come on, present. There we go. So the first two slides I have on here is just kind of a recap of this roller coaster that our athletes went through. You know, and I'm not going to read every date to you. You guys can read all those, and you've lived it, you know. But for our athletes, all these dates had a significant meaning because it was either a high of, hey, we're going to start, or it was a low of, oh, we're probably not going to have a season. Obviously, the first case in Maine was March 12th. We all remember that. And then you can see the 23rd, we were supposed to start pitchers and catchers. That was delayed. And then April 9th, they canceled the spring. And then on the bottom, all those dates, July 6th, July 31st, August 14th, August 24th, were all dates that I was having our athletes get ready for summer workouts. The MPA had given the opportunity for summer sessions to begin with protocols and procedures in place. So all of those dates were dates that we were looking at as a possible start date for summer stuff. And of course, all of our kids were excited. And then at the last minute, we had to kind of say no. And then you can start to see towards the end, obviously, the 27th, the MPA offered all fall sports. And then they came back. The state agency basically said a couple of days later, all fall sports can go except football and volleyball. And football and volleyball was allowed to go, but it was summer stuff. So volleyball was outdoors, which provided some challenges because we don't have an outdoor volleyball court. We were playing on our tennis courts. And football could do 7-on-7. Okay, and we finally started on September 14th with our athletics at the high school. And this one just shows you the level of risk that the MPA assigned. The MPA, the state agencies, low, medium, and high. And obviously, sideline cheer, cross-country running, golf, weightlifting, all those things were low risk, low transmission. And soccer and field hockey were categorized as medium risk. And then football and volleyball were high risk, and that's why they were not allowed to participate. So what did we do in the athletic department to, and I don't want to say that we can stop any risk of transmission or whatever else, but to minimize as much as possible. The NFHS, which is the National Federation of High School Sports, created a COVID-19 course. It was a video. All the coaches had to watch that. It gave some pretty good information on the virus and things. Before every practice, our athletes had to fill out a pre-screening questionnaire, which was 2 questions. They could do it right on their phone. Basically, did they have any symptoms, or had they been in contact with anybody for 14 days? And they would either get a green screen or a red screen. If they got a red screen, they were told that they had to go home. They couldn't attend practice. We did have a couple kids that did get red screens. They obviously were not infected with the virus, but they had the sniffles, or they had a cough or whatever else. So out of precaution, they stayed home. And like I said, knock on wood, we didn't have any issues. Our athletes had to wear a mask unless they were engaged in physical activity. Our athletes during warm-ups and stretching and things like that would always have a mask on. Our runners, even on some cool downs and things, had masks. If weather was bad, we didn't go practice indoors. In a typical fall, if the weather's bad, we'd move practices indoors. We didn't do that. If the weather was bad, we either canceled or we practiced in the rain. There were many runs. Liz is shaking her head. There were many runs in the rain. We had many practices in the rain. And I think the kids had a good time with it for the most part. But and then the busing, we know the busing situation, obviously, with our students for school. Only 23 people can be on a bus. So many athletic contests, we had to send at least 2 buses, sometimes 3. Bathrooms, each team had a bathroom that they were assigned to, home and away. Regional play only. So we could play Cumberland County schools because the high school is in Cumberland County, and that's the designation we went with. We didn't go with York, but we went with Cumberland County, and we could participate and play against schools from Oxford or York County. York County was in yellow. They weren't allowed to participate, so we couldn't. We did have a couple games that were canceled. Freiburg and Saukville Valley on our field hockey side got canceled because the county was yellow at that time. And it did make it kind of challenging because trying to reschedule games, our field hockey team actually played Oxford Hills JV squad, and our JV kids played Oxford Hills freshman squad because their varsity had to quarantine. But our kids wanted to play, and so we made the best of it. This slide is just showing the number of athletes. We had a total of 254 fall athletes, which is roughly the same number. One of the concerns I had was we were not providing activity bus runs for athletes, so kids would have to get their own rides. And our district, it's so spread out, they count on that activity bus run. Our numbers really weren't down that much. Typically I think we're between 270 and 280 a season. Sometimes it fluctuates a little bit. So being at 254, I think all of the kids that wanted to participate did, for the most part. I don't think transportation was an issue for them. And so our contest, I talked about girls soccer a little bit, and Coons set the record with 42 goals. Our girls soccer season ended 2 games shy because of quarantining. Our boys soccer had all 8 contests that they were scheduled for. And both of our boys and girls soccer were put into a pod with Gorham, Scarborough, and Wyndham, who are typically pretty good in soccer, and we had to play those teams 6 times. So obviously the records may not have been as good as we wanted to, but the kids got all their games in for boys soccer. Field hockey, we had 8 contests, and again, that was kind of a challenge because of Oxford Hills varsity. We had to play their JVs and things like that, but our girls had a winning record in field hockey, and we actually had scored quite a few goals in field hockey. Our field hockey team has not scored very many goals the last few years, so it was kind of a good thing for our kids. They worked hard and did a great job. Football, as I said, was 7-on-7, so it's skills. If you've never seen a 7-on-7 game, it's very different. There are no linemen. It's just passing routes and things like that. Coach Cooper did a great job because our linemen and things were not participating in 7-on-7 because they don't run pass routes, and the likelihood of getting kids injured is pretty high. So what we did is on a Saturday, we did a big man skills challenge. And again, we had to keep everything under 100, but we had Oxford Hills come, we had South Portland, we had Cheverus and Thornton Academy come, and we did an obstacle course. We did lineman challenges and things like that. And I have to be honest, that was one of my highlights of the fall. Okay, these 3 instances I brought up earlier are obviously pretty significant and important, but the lineman challenge was a pretty awesome experience because being at Bonnie Eagle for 22 years and seeing the rivalry with TA especially, it's not always pleasant. And at that big man's challenge, TA kids were cheering on Bonnie Eagle kids and vice versa. It was pretty awesome to see. The kids had a great time. We were there for about 3.5, 4 hours, and it started to rain. But again, we gave the kids a great experience with that. Our boys cross country finished 4 points out of 3rd place, which would have qualified them for states, but they would have been in the same fate as girls, that states would have been canceled. Golf, we had 6 contests, and we even had 2 for JV. We had 16 golfers this year, which is by far one of our highest. And some of that is because some of our football players switched over to golf because they wanted some competition that wasn't 7-on-7. And our cheerleaders, obviously, it was not the season they wanted, but we did cheer for 7 contests. We had 8 home contests, and the last home contest was very cold in a pretty good downpour. So the kids did not cheer for that one, but they did cheer for 7 of our soccer games. And again, not the season that the cheerleaders wanted, but it still was a season for them. They participated and did a great job as well. Volleyball, as I said, we had 1 contest. We went to Scarborough for 1 outdoor volleyball contest because playing volleyball outdoors is very different, and we weren't accustomed to playing on the grass and things like that. So the kids only had 1 contest, but hopefully volleyball and football will be offered later on in the season. So the last thing I want to point out is, obviously the last slide after this is a bunch of thank yous and for making the fall season happen for our kids. But the last thing I want to point out is our streaming. Fans were not allowed at our games, okay? I was one of the, I don't know, the other ADs weren't very happy with me, but I allowed our senior parents to come work for me. They were our ball boys and girls. They were our scorekeepers. They were our clock operators, things like that. So I could get senior parents on to the sidelines, but they had to work for me. And our parents were awesome. Our kids were awesome. Our parents were awesome. It worked out great. But I did have some issues. Some other schools weren't happy with me, and some of their parents weren't happy, so it caused some issues. But I wanted to point out our streaming. A couple years ago, I went to Finance and Facilities and asked for the ability to purchase a camera so we could stream our contest. And it's been good. It's not great, but it's good. And parents and grandparents that live afar can see the games. And I want to show you, this is that NFHS camera. And this is actually Hayley Coons' 42nd goal right here. But this is our NFHS camera. You can see the action. You can see that Wyndham is playing Bonnie Eagle. Hayley Coons just scored a goal. They're running back. It's okay. It's not great, but it's okay. And that's what a lot of schools were doing, okay? We told parents they couldn't come to contests, and that's what a lot of schools were doing. Again, it's okay, but it's not great. Our technology department helped me out, and we did streaming with Saco River TV in our technology department. Actually, Heath did a lot of our streaming. I actually did all of our streaming. But this is that same play, okay, with our streaming. And if you look at the quality, obviously it's a lot better, and it's even got the score on there, okay? Doesn't have time, but it's got the score on there, and we get a little animated graphic that pops up here, just a little nice touch, okay? Scott's goal, etc. I can't tell you how many compliments I got for our streaming, okay? I had a guy from Wyndham say, I actually love when my kids play at Bonnie Eagle because your streaming is so much better than ours. So, you know, I put on here, no, go to the next slide. You know, obviously a thank you to all the parents and athletes that made the season a success. Our custodian maintenance crew, they did an amazing job, obviously trying to keep everything clean for us. Transportation, trying to get the buses out there. I can't tell you how many times I called Dottie or Tina and said, hey, I have a change. Can we make this happen? And things like that. Our technology department, our streaming was so much better than other communities. And if we're telling parents they can't be there, you know, obviously that's a huge thing. And also with that, the technology department, our finance and facilities committee meeting obviously allowed, and Mr. Brockman allowed us to do that for the funds for that. Obviously, the group that I work with was great. My game day tweets, Julie, thank you. Did some personalized things for our seniors, which was awesome. And then, obviously, thank you to all you guys for the support with that. The fall season was not what we had hoped for. It wasn't what we wanted, but it was a good fall season. And our kids, I think, had a great opportunity. And hopefully, we'll be able to offer some stuff in the wintertime, depending on how that goes. So. Thank you, guys.
Very good. Thank you very much, Mr. Curtis, and all your staff for all the hard work to make sure our students still had a semblance of a season to come back to. From everything I've heard from Mr. Peno over the past few months and from your presentation, seems to have gone off as successfully as it could have. We do want to thank you for all your hard work. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Mrs. DiPaolitano.
I was wondering, just for the people who aren't aware, like can you kind of give a comparison? Like the soccer team played 8 games. What is a typical season? How many, was they playing about half as many games as usual or a third as many?
A typical season, soccer and field hockey typically play about 14 games. Cross country had 4 meets. They typically, I want to say they typically have 6. But I don't really know the typical because our kids always go to states. So we have a lot more than that. I can't say that we had 2/3 of a season. A lot of it would depend. And like I said, our girls' soccer team ended up with 7, but we would have had 9 because we were trying to get a game with TA because Coach Nason started at TA and the coach at TA played for him, and we kind of wanted to end with that group. But we had roughly a little bit more than half of what we would typically have for contest for every sport.
Very good. Any questions? Mrs. Bruni?
Thank you for that. It was awesome, Eric. From winter, like, do you have any updates? Like, do you know what the timing is or what any of that looks like from a winter perspective? Sorry if you...
Yeah, no. Yeah, real quickly. And again, the Sports Medicine Committee is meeting on Wednesday of this week. And the Management Committee, the MPA Management Committee is meeting on Thursday. What they have proposed, and supposedly everything is approved by the state agencies, and the MPA, they've come to an agreement. And what it looks like is December 7th, we can start skills and drills only. No scrimmaging, no nothing, just skills and drills, December 7th. December 14th, we can start inter-squad scrimmages. And then January 11th, we can start regional competition. The problem is, to be very honest, our indoor track, USM right now is not allowing anybody in the field house. So indoor track doesn't have a place to do meets. And even if we did have a place to do meets, we can only have 50 people. Bonnie Eagle has 75, 80 kids in indoor track. So we couldn't even go to a meet with under 50 people. Even under 100 would be difficult with the officiating crew. So right now, that's a hurdle that we have to get through. St. Joe's, I've got them willing to listen to a proposal from me, how we can sanitize and keep things clean. They don't want anybody on their campus for the pool, and I don't think it's a good idea to put our kids in Sebago. Might be kind of chilly right now. So that's a hurdle. But right now the dates are the 7th, 14th, and January 11th. Wrestling is most likely going to be pushed until March, along with the volleyball season is looking at March as well. And competition cheering will happen, but I think they're recommending that they don't actually cheer at games, they just do the competition. And the competition is maybe more virtual than in person because you can't have 18 teams from the SMAA going to one location.
And that's great, thank you. Will they change the policy like that because I know that they didn't have to wear masks in the fall. Like, are they changing any of that? Like, are any of the rules changing around that?
Yep. The governor's mandate that came out on Friday, which is what prompted the cross-country meet to kind of get canceled, was that all athletes will be in mask at all times.
Okay.
And I will tell you, a lot of colleges are doing that right now. My son at St. Joe's has been wearing a mask all season. I was on a meeting last week with Amy Vachon, who's the head coach at UMaine. Her kids have been wearing a mask since June, and it's one of the things that, as long as kids are acclimated to it, it's not bad. But to put our cross-country kids in a mask on Friday and go run next week at a state-level competition was just too much.
Yeah, and I understand, like, other states are wearing masks anyway. Yeah. Like, if you played in New Hampshire over the season, like, you were wearing a mask.
Yep, that's the recommendation, is just wearing a mask right now.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Any other questions or comments for Mr. Curtis? Seeing none, thank you very much, sir. And we'll turn the floor over to Ms. Winton for the Adult Education Program goals.
Hi, good evening, and how can I top that? I don't know. He's done such a great job. So I'd like to present the goals for this school year. And our first goal is, since IT is a really big career aspiration or career pathway, I could say, and you can find IT in every single industry, from healthcare to schools to, anything. We want to start an online IC3 class and offer it to the community. I'm working with the Maine Department of Education, Department of Adult Education. We have a curriculum that is in place, and I also gave you a little addendum from CertiLearn. It's an overview of what the class is. They call it digital literacy, but it's not really that easy. You have to, I took the class a few months ago, and you have to really know how to use a PC or an Apple or Mac product, and be familiar with either Google or Microsoft Office. It's not for beginners who have never used a computer before. And what it does is, if you ever call a call desk or someone, like you call LL Bean or someone you're calling, I don't know, I've called Dell quite a number of times with my computers to get some help. It's not to that level, but it can start somebody on an entry-level job where they can get a stackable credential and then move their way up. And if you have the opportunity to look at the CertiPort site, it will have a lot of their licenses and the certifications that they offer. So once somebody completes this program, there are 3 tests, there are 3 areas. One is in general computer, what is a computer, what are the parts of the computer type of things. The second part is key applications, and they go over Word and PowerPoint and Excel. And then the third part is living online, and they go over Google and all the internet and social media and a little bit of everything. So it's an introduction. Once they someone finishes each section, there is a test at each section, and then these tests, then there is a test that really mimics what it's like to take the certification exam. So somebody could, after they took this course, get the certification exam. And it's kind of tough. They're all timed. You have to do 5 or 6 tasks in about a minute, and you really have to know your stuff. So it's a really interesting course, and I'm looking forward to offering it to the community. And it will be free of charge. So the second goal is to complete a security and safety audit in order to review and or revise security protocols in the building. One of the action steps is to have Buxton Fire Rescue do a fire safety audit of our Jack Memorial School. I have met with the IT departments and some incident commander in case of emergency. Scott will be off, I think, someplace with Paul. So I will be there in the building. And we have had tabletop drills before. We put together some scenarios and we did things. This was a few years ago, and Scott has had some changes in staff and whatever, so I think it would be a good time to review this and to just review our safety manual and what we do and how we do it. And then for us, we do a lot of testing for the community. We do Accuplacer tests and HiSET tests and CASAS tests, and I can name a few more. And we have developed very good safety protocols following CDC and the MSAD 6 guidelines for paper and computer-based tests, and they're quite different in our protocols. And also for the face-to-face classes, we wear masks. We have people, when they come in, there's a little station where they clean their hands, put on a mask, stay 6 feet apart. The classes, we still have our classes, but instead of having 10 people in a class, we might have 6. Instead of having 20, we might have 10. So we have everybody spaced out, everything marked on the floor, on the rugs, where they can sit and stand. And we're trying to be as safe as possible, as every other school in the district is. So the outcomes would be, once we have the safety audit, we would have safety plan review and drills conducted with building staff this year, and students and staff will follow testing and class procedure protocols. The third goal is to provide students equitable access to necessary educational materials, including technology, explore, develop, and support remote learning online pathways. We received some COVID relief funds. We purchased some Chromebooks for students who don't have devices, whereas the K-12 schools get devices, we don't for adult ed, so we were very fortunate to have these COVID relief funds to be able to purchase some more. We have a lot of students who just can't afford them, they don't have them, or they might have one person, 5 people using one laptop at home, so this will give them an opportunity. A lot of our we have a lot of things online. We have a thing called HiSET Academy, and we use it in conjunction with the class. We have the face-to-face class, and then if students have homework or whatever, they can go on HiSET Academy and they can really perfect their skills in any of the 5 testing areas, and they really like that program, and it's been working well. We have been able to buy licenses for HiSET Academy for students to use as a supplement to class time, and we've given them instruction on how to use the software. And we have offered, this has been a really big hit from since March. We have had online synchronous through Zoom ESL classes, so stay-at-home parents could study without the added burden of paying for childcare. A lot of our ESL students are grandmothers or young mothers, and really appreciate having the children there while they're taking the class, and it's been very popular with them. And we are going to provide free training to instructors so they can be prepared to convert to synchronous learning. we're talking about for that one, the enrichment instructors, and we're going to be having a free course to teach people how to use Zoom. Because you hear Zoom all the time, everybody's doing, Zooming, and so we're going to have a course just to show them how to set it up on their computer, how to be a participant in the class, and also how to teach a class using it. So the outcomes will be when the Chromebooks are lent to the students and when our students are given new opportunities to learn that fit in with their needs through face-to-face, synchronous, and online learning, because we also have strictly online learning as well, but they're always used as a supplement to the classes. And instructors, hopefully, will have the technical skills to teach their classes online if we need to do so.
Very good, thank you.
Thanks.
Are there any questions or comments, Mr. Deacon?
I'd like to thank you and all of your staff do for our adult education program. I know in terms of our overall budget, it's a small piece of the pie of the millions of dollars that we spend on education in our district. But adult education is one where there's a lot of bang for the buck, because each time we have students that complete our program as adults, it not only affects them as an individual, but they're typically part of a family and can mean a number of advantages for the children and the family as a whole by the successes that they get from the adult education program. And for the state overall, our adults are an untapped resource that our state really needs to develop economically. So the opportunities that we have for adults is not just for those individuals, it's really benefiting their families and the state as a whole. So it's very important. I understand that in Goal 2, you're doing the safety audit. As a part of that, I would expect that that includes reviewing ready access to enter the building and ease of access for egress in emergencies. And so if there is not an accessible entrance to your building, my expectation is that any safety audit would include having ready access for persons with disabilities to enter the adult education program. And I think that might be a concern that needs to be addressed. Related to that is that the facilities that our adult education program has historically probably has not been considered a priority, but it's about time that we look at the facility as a whole and consider whether it's appropriate for adults and whether there should be adjustments in the facilities so that restrooms, as well as accessible entrances, chairs, can be fully accessible to our adult students. Because, again, the adult programs that we have, while a small portion of our overall budget, really have enormous significance to the individuals, their families, and to our state. And I would encourage you to look at those areas that I mentioned. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Deacon. What I could do is make an appointment to meet with the Facilities Committee, perhaps, and we can put it on their list and we can discuss that further. That's a good suggestion. Thank you very much.
Very good. Any other questions or comments, Mrs. Kreutz?
I just wanted to commend you on the good work you're doing, meeting your students where they are. Just really some creative solutions here. I love the idea of renting out or lending out the Chromebooks so that these students can really participate in their education in the modern world. So just keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Mr. Kotis? Okay, sorry, I thought I saw your hand up. Okay, well, thank you very much, Ms. Winton, for all your work and all your staff's work through these trying times, and we do want to wish you and your staff all the best for the rest of the year.
Well, thanks, Mr. Eustace, and thanks to all. Thank you.
Great.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so I'll now entertain a motion to approve the goals as presented. Moved by Mrs. Kreutz. Do I have a second? Seconded by Mr. Sargent. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? It is unanimous. Now the consent agenda. We have approval of the November 2nd, 2020 regular board meeting minutes, co-curricular appointments for the 2020-2021 school year. At the high school, credit recovery and Edmentum interventionists, English, Amanda Jones and Tina St. Pierre, health and physical education, Aaron Bjorkdahl, mathematics, Elizabeth Hayden and Faye Prescott, science, Jennifer LaRose, social studies, Brianna Belafonte and Krupski and Christian Loof, Basketball coach, varsity boys, John Trull. Basketball assistant coach, varsity boys, Kevin Cooper. Basketball coach, JV boys, Michael Harmon. Basketball coach, first team boys, Douglas Wilcox. Basketball coach, varsity girls, Scott Regan. Basketball assistant coach, varsity girls, Tana Ross. Basketball coach, JV girls, Bruce Hankin. Indoor track coach, boys, Michael Burleson. Indoor track coach, girls, Ryan Dyer. Indoor track assistant coaches, Benjamin Davis and Kabir Edwards. Ice hockey coach, boys, Robert Fothergill. Ice hockey assistant coach, boys, Wayne Neiman. Ice hockey coach, girls, co-op, Nathaniel Gramond. And ice hockey assistant coach, girls, co-op, Mary Vaughn. Swim coach, boys and girls, Amanda Cry. Cheerleading coach for varsity winter, Whitney Wyman. Wrestling coach, Joshua Lund. And wrestling program volunteer, Tom Turner. Do I have a motion? Moved by Mr. Carlo, seconded by Mrs. Kreutz. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? It is unanimous.
Trevor, I'd just like to add that I appreciate and thank you for approving those. Those will be contingent on, we know, the season, depending on where we go with COVID, the length of the season, as well as the competition. So as we did in the fall, some of those rates may be prorated. We may make other decisions. We'll put that in the contract that, based on my discretion, based on what the season does in competition, we'll decide on what the stipend will be. But having that approval gives us the leadway to begin work. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. And now moving on into my report, I did want to engage the board in a brief discussion on the format of our future meetings as we get through the holidays and the winter months. As you all know, COVID cases in the state of Maine and throughout the country are surging, and we do have the option to go to remote meetings once again, as we did over the summer and the end of last year. And of course, also I know people have different levels of comfortableness with the masks, and the governor's new order does require that they remain on at all times, and I do want to thank everyone for keeping them on. So I just wanted to open the floor to anyone, see what people's preferences were as we go through these next few months, if they wanted to remain in our current setup of in-person meetings or go to remote, or wait and see how things are on the ground here. So really just want to open it up to anyone who has any comments on that. Mrs. Anderson.
Thank you. I mean, I think as long as we can stay in person, that would be my preference. So we could still follow the safety guidelines, and I think by staying in person, it just shows the students too that, we can follow the guidelines and do our best to, stay in person as much as possible. Nobody likes to wear masks, but I would much rather be here in the presence of everyone than look at my computer.
Great, thank you. Anyone else have any comments? Mr. Deacon?
Anyone who listens to the news finds that the progress of the virus is not abating, and has increasing highs in terms of infections, hospitalizations, and the winter season is just starting in terms of potential for overlapping with the flu virus as well as COVID. And the resulting overburdening of our healthcare system that can result from the twin effects of both at the same time. Besides wearing masks, social distancing, and limiting your contact with others in closed spaces are important features taken not individually but also together to help reduce transmission. So long meetings in a room with other people, even wearing masks, has its drawbacks in terms of whatever benefits we get from masks. It's better to wear them than not. Whatever benefit we get from these plexiglass shields, it's better to have them than not. But we're still a large, significant group of people in an enclosed space. I'm not aware of any particular research that was done on the cubic foot per minute exchange rate in this particular building, but we're in an enclosed space, stairways, elevators, rooms, where there are groups of people, all contribute to potential for infection. And if we don't go remote, there is the potential that the bubble of this group be adversely affected by all of our other bubbles that we're part of. The bubbles that you have at work, in your family, the places you shop, the other groups that you belong to. And so if we want to continue to function as a school board, it's in our best interest to not congregate as a group, but to conduct our meetings remotely so that we can retain a school board that functions, rather than a school board that doesn't function because one or more of us get sick at some point in time. So it would be my recommendation, and if I need to make a motion, I would do so if that's what it takes, that we conduct our meetings, starting with our next scheduled meeting remotely, and that the chair, in conjunction with the superintendent, monitor the situation and the instructions from the governor and other officials. So if at such time it becomes appropriate to reconvene personally, that we do so. But I would move that we conduct future meetings for an indefinite period remotely through Zoom.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion?
No, I'd like to make a comment first.
We do need to get the second first before we move along in the discussion. Moved by Mrs. Dakotas. Okay. Mrs. Kreutz had her hand up, and then we'll go to you, Mr. Sargent.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I mean, I'm comfortable either way. I think that we're doing a decent job social distancing. We're wearing our masks. I also respect that there are some that may have higher risk levels. So personally, I'm comfortable either way. My guiding principle would be to go with what the schools are doing. So if we are looking at low enough cases, that the superintendent and the folks that they're using to make decisions about whether the school should be in session is probably sufficient for me as well. And if the schools felt that there were cases in the community that we should pull back, that would be my impetus to suggest remote meetings. That being said, I'm comfortable either way.
Mr. Sargent.
As long as we expect students to go to school and meet a couple of days a week, I feel that the board should meet as a group. We're wearing masks, we're behind shields, we're washing our hands, we're socially distanced. But you could do it meeting by meeting, and we could make a decision as we go. But to say right now to do that, we pull back, but the students are in school, I agree with Julie. I think that we should meet. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Mrs. Atkinson.
I'd like to echo to that same notion that it's our duty to conduct the business of this district, and as long as we are expecting our students to follow procedure and continue to meet in a group, I think we owe it to them to do that as well.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Carlo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would agree with previous sentiments that have been expressed, that as long as schools are open and as long as this board expects our staff and students and other faculty to attend school and their work, then we should be doing our work physically as well, until such time that the district has to go remote, if that is what happens in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, there is a motion on the floor that we go remote until further notice. So all those in favor of that, please raise your hand. One in favor, all opposed? And the remainder opposed, so the motion fails. The previous motion that was adopted by the board was that we would meet in person and give the chair, superintendent, and vice chair the discretion to move us back to remote meetings if the environment warrants it. So we will continue to monitor the situation. If for some reason the schools do have to go remote, it's highly likely that we will also be going remote at that time. But I think the board was very clear that we should remain in person as long as we are able to with our masks and with our plexiglass, but then again, we will continue to monitor the situation, and we'll take this meeting by meeting, week by week. So thank you very much for that. I do also want to recognize Mrs. Dakotas. She asked for some opportunity to bring to the board's attention some grant work she's working on with our food service department.
Mr. Deacon and I have been attending the Cumberland County Food Council meetings for some time. This is a group which includes local and statewide agencies whose mission is to help end childhood hunger. And the group in York County is not functioning at this time, and the Cumberland County group has been very welcoming to Mr. Deacon and me attending the meetings. They have a huge network of agencies, and they primarily target the Portland public schools. But whenever I hear of any monies or assistance, I bring it back to share with the superintendent and Ms. Janata, the director of food services here. On November 4th, Mr. Deacon and I were sent a notice by the director of the Food Council indicating the possibility of applying for a grant, which was to be presented by November 18th. And it's sponsored by two groups, Share Our Strengths and No Kid Hungry, focusing on rural communities. So we sent a notice to the superintendent and the assistant superintendent and Mr. Eustace and Mrs. Kreutz. And it was indicated that we could meet with Ms. Janata and to discuss applying for this grant. There were four outcomes that the group is focusing on. One is to increase food security in children. Second, increase participation in all the federal nutrition programs. 3, to reduce the stigma associated with accessing supplemental programs for food. And the 4th was to increase community engagement in ending food insecurity through long-term intervention. And so on November 10th, I met with Ms. Janata because Mr. Deacon was working, and we brainstormed ideas as to what was needed within the district and what we could possibly request funding for. So we focused on two of the goals because the staff is currently working on 2 of them. So we focused on trying to increase food security among children in rural areas and to increase the community member volunteers to be involved to end food insecurity. Now, we just submitted a very preliminary form that had to be received by the 18th. And then we will hear back on December 2nd as to whether we might have received any money, and then a full goals and objectives has to be submitted by the December 18th. So we focused on increasing the filling and distribution of weekend meal boxes for children, which would be above what the school nutrition program is currently doing. The boxes would include shelf-stable items and hopefully fresh produce to supplement the family's food budgets. We looked at the money to cover labor costs and the packaging, because this is a kind of a new cost with the food having to be put into bags and sent home with the children. And labor costs as well. And then possibly some delivery to homes, because transportation is still an interfering factor in the district for families to come, even though the Ms. Janata and her staff are offering so many pickup times during the week. But transportation, some people they don't have transportation to get here. So, all right. I think that, so we're hoping that we might be able to get even some funds to expand this program. And again, I guess I would just request that anybody who can try to complete the forms for the free lunches and breakfasts, the money is really important, because as the school is recognized for how many people really need food, extra funds come into the district to allow the program to expand to meet everyone's needs. So as I said, next, if we're waiting until December 2nd to hear if we are eligible, and then we will develop goals and objectives that will be monitored through the activities that the grant will cover.
Mr. Deacon?
Just to add something briefly, I appreciate everything that my colleague, Mr. Kotis, has done to further this opportunity, working with the chair and the superintendent and staff to see if this grant could be something we could make use of. Before the COVID crisis, there were hungry kids in our district, and it's not getting any better because of the economic situation affecting so many workers and their families, and it affects our students. So I want to acknowledge that there are lots of other people doing things, and this is just one of many, but it takes all of it, I think. Recently in Standish, the Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts did a big food drive for the Standish Food Pantry. We have our ongoing backpack program, and our food nutrition staff now are already working very tirelessly and with tremendous effort to do all that they can to make food available to our kids. But it's important. We're an education entity, and reading and writing, arithmetic, all of that, yes, is the core. But in modern education, we realize the whole child needs something more than that, and food is a part of that. And so I'm grateful that we have district staff that are doing all that they're doing, and we're just trying to work with them to help get a little bit more done, because there's more that's needed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions or comments for Mr. Deacon and Mrs. Dakotas? Seeing none, are there any questions for me? Mrs. Kreitz?
Just thinking about the information that Ms. Dakotas and Mr. Deacon have brought forth, and Ms. Harriman's report, the Bonnie Eagle Middle School is running a community food drive through, I believe it was the 10th. I think this could be a great opportunity for our board to have some fellowship and participate in the season of giving back and being an active part in our community. With the chair's permission, I think it would be great if we could participate, and I would be more than happy to be the point person to reach out to the school, see if there's anything in particular that they're looking for beyond what was provided, and then I can send an email out to our group, and then if people were interested, they could bring stuff in at our next meeting on the 7th. I can collect it and drop it off at the school. Just a way, we don't have a lot of opportunities to kind of come together with COVID, but this might be a nice way for us to show that we are a unified group and we're just here to help the community in more than one way.
Very good, thank you. No, certainly appreciate that, and your willingness to volunteer and coordinate that effort. I think it's a great idea.
Okay, great, thank you.
Great. Does anyone have any further questions or comments? Seeing none, would anyone like a 5-minute break before we continue? I know people have been. Yes. Okay. Well, we'll come back. Time is it? 7:10. 5 minutes. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you all for being here. Before we proceed on to our action items this evening, I would like to recognize the superintendent for his report.
Thank you very much. In your package, you already have a copy of the truancy reports for October and November. And as far as the new staff hires and resignations, we want to thank the donations from Lindsay Kennedy for a donation of 160 water bottles and several pairs of gloves and hats to benefit the students at Edna Libby, approximately $32 value. I want to thank Sharon Ames, for a donation of 63 hand-sewn children masks to benefit the children of Steep Falls, approximate value of $315. Thank you to Leamington Orthodox Presbyterian Church for a donation of 45 backpacks with school supplies and healthy snacks inside to benefit the H.B. Emory Memorial School, approximately $450 value. And a donation, thank you for DonorsChoose.org, of course, for a donation of $584.51 to support Mr. Levin's educational outdoor cooking spectacularness project at Bonnie Eagle Middle School. And again, thank you for the district backpack program. We always get donations for that program at every meeting, and we're really appreciative of those. The 3 updates I'd like to give you, I know we have a board report coming up. Again, we'll talk a little bit about recommendations moving forward. Just want to let the board know of 3 things that are going on currently amongst all the other things. You may have seen the letters that went out on the academic outreach program, which is one of the COVID funds, the CARES Act funds, the last of the CARES Act fund money that we put out for a project, and we were successful in receiving that academic outreach program. So I met today with a representative group of the staff, and so we're going to begin contacting the 50 people that have contacted us so far that is interested in having us do some outreach and additional support that allows us to go into the community. That's the difference of that project. It allows us to move in the community. We can meet people at their homes, at the rec departments, at schools. So we'll develop that as it goes on, but we'll start in our contacts this week for those parents who have opted in to be part of the academic outreach program. You may have seen the YouTube video that I put out there. I try to stay updated on those. Just, again, preparing families to be ready for the bus ride, that we do have to keep the windows in front and the windows in back open for circulation. That allows the bus not to become a cohort should we have a positive case. And so I just asked families to make sure the children are dressing in layers and are warm. The buses are obviously with the heats on and the windows open. Heat's going right out the window, so it's not as comfortable as it's been in the past. And lastly, I just want to mention that the work that I'm doing currently on the inclement weather days, we talked a little bit, I've been talking a little bit about having school run remotely on inclement weather days. That's yet to be decided. There's a lot of variables I'm working that through. I'm going to get the letter out because it needs to go out to families now. I'm going to get it out this week saying that if we have any inclement weather days between now and the Christmas holiday break, we'll run it as we normally have run it, and the announcement would be on the news as usual, and we probably would run an inclement day. I have to work through the hourly employee issues to make sure that they will be getting paid in some form, especially with pay averaging. It's another impact. And typically when you cancel a day of school, they make those work days up at the end of the year. That won't be happening because students would be in school on our remote days. So I need to make sure that everything is, that our I's are dotted and our T's are crossed before we roll that out. I have met with all the association representatives and presidents to make sure that they're well aware of what we're trying to do and they're supportive, but I need to make sure of the pay for our hourly employees, and so that they don't get shortchanged on an inclement weather day and receive no pay for the day of work. So I'm working through that. But I think for, just so you're well aware, I think for the inclement weather days, I'll be getting the letter out this week. From now to the holidays, we'll just make sure that if we have any, it'll be a regular, what we usually do. But hopefully moving forward, we will be able to have remote days on inclement weather days and avoid having the lengthening of the school year. We're having students go to school in June. And then I'll bring the rest of the work we've been doing on our plan, our hybrid plan moving forward. I'll talk about that shortly.
Very good, thank you. Any questions or comments for the superintendent? Mrs. Bruning.
So I have a question with regards to the truancy report. So is it typical that there's no truancies at the high school? Or is that, like, that just doesn't, that seemed odd? And
No,
so
well,
I'm
I'll tell
hoping
you what's
that
happening. I mean, you can have Mr. Applesein speak to it if you want, but what's happening is that because of the rotation of days that they work on, they come in 2 days, so the interruption, right, the scenario of 7 or 10 days when they hit those marks, changes because they're only in school those 2 days and then they're off those days. So you can't count the days they're not in school. So it takes that much longer to actually be coded as a truant student. So they could come back for one of those and then be out again, and then they wouldn't be truant.
And so I guess, but that would prove true, so thank you. That makes sense. And so that would prove true the same thing for the middle school. So I guess is the middle school, like if it's.
No.
Hold on, Paul.
Hold on, I think Hetty is doing an explanation. I think Hetty has an explanation for the data.
I do have an explanation for the data. So, we have new staff, and we at the high school, we have new staff at the at central office who are taking care of the data. And what we learned this week was because we have a new dean and we have a new administrative assistant, not all of the information was flowing through correctly. So you notice that in your reports, we've been putting all of the months. We've been doing, starting in September, you can see in your report, you have October and November with a line of Septembers as well. You'll notice next month that it will be corrected for October and November and September because our administrative assistant is now getting the information from the high school.
Yeah, there are truancies for the high school because I've seen them on the spreadsheet, but I don't think they were going correctly into the report that goes to you guys.
Okay, thank you. Because I had asked Ben last week, I was like, wow, it seemed like it was a spike, and Ben had explained to me that it takes a little bit longer in the system, or they have to be out so many days in order for that to report. So it looks like the numbers are going down, right? And so is there something that we're...
No, they're not really going down. No, I don't think you'll find, when we ultimately get the data caught up with things, I think that's the other issue that actually I was going to put in my presentation that I didn't put in there, on saying that I think we're seeing some increases, which is consistent across the state.
Okay, all right, then forget it. I don't have any other
Well,
questions.
don't forget it. I think it's a big issue and it's an important issue. It's an issue that we're dealing with across the state. They've lost 8,000 students in different variations of accountability in the state of Maine, and 2,000 are literally just lost in the state of Maine. They think they may be out of country, but there are 3,000 in homeschooling across the state, and again, not complete documentation. So there's a lot of issues going on, and our district is equally impacted by that data as the state is. So people are trying to get the handle on it. I wouldn't suspect that the numbers will be going down ultimately when the report catches up to where we are.
Right, I was kind of shocked that it went down, but I didn't know if we were doing something super fabulous that was like helping that, but okay.
Well, we're not doing something super fabulous, but we're not helping that.
Okay. Just other super fabulous things. All right, thank you.
Any other questions or comments for the superintendent? Seeing none, I will turn the floor over to our school nurses for their presentation for the to allow MS86 to apply to be a COVID-19 testing site for students, and I'm told it's now staff as well. But before I give them the microphone, I do just want to let the board know, in case they have not already heard, that our own Donna Jordan was named School Nurse of the Year. I can't, yes. I can't stress how huge this is for Bonnie Eagle and how deserving that Mrs. Jordan is of this recognition. Just goes to show that Bonnie Eagle is truly a place for excellence, and we do want to thank Mrs. Jordan for all her hard work for our students. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Eustis. I appreciate that.
Of course, and with that, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. My name is Donna Jordan. I'm the school nurse at Bonnie Eagle Middle School. I'm here with Jennifer Dowell, the school nurse from Bonnie Eagle High School, and Jessie Woodman, the Standish Elementary School nurse, dedicated now to Edna Libby. And so we are here this evening seeking board approval for the development to offer MSAD 6 students and staff point-of-care COVID-19 testing using the Abbott Binex Now COVID-19 antigen card. Part of this approval, we're also looking to, it's going to include continuing with our investigation of this program as to the feasibility of this endeavor and program development, and hopefully the end result will be on-site COVID-19 rapid testing. And so the state of Maine between now and December, we'll be receiving approximately 400,000 of these cards for testing, for rapid testing for COVID-19. And they just announced last week approximately 300,000 of these test kits have been dedicated to the Walgreens effort to offer this test. The Binex Now COVID-19 AG card is a 15-minute test. It's a very reliable test, and so out of the 400,000 tests, there'll be about 100,000 tests left. And we are hearing that approximately 40,000 of these tests are going to be dedicated to the Department of Education for deployment into our schools for those who choose to offer such a program. So you're asking, what is Binex Now? I'm going to show you a little video and let them describe what it is. So as you can see from the video, it's a point-of-care rapid antigen test that provides results as early as 15 minutes and as late as 29 to 30 minutes. It's designed for use in individuals who may develop symptoms during the course of the day. So that's what we're kind of looking for in the long term. So why do we want to do this? How is it going to help us in our school community?
So I broke it down into two categories that we see as benefits, that it can be protective and productive. So protective because it will allow us to more quickly identify positive COVID individuals, will allow us to isolate them sooner, and if necessary will allow us to close our schools quicker, and will reduce the potential exposure to those at risk and thereby slow the spread of COVID-19. Productive because it may enable a quicker return to on-site learning and work for students and staff, a potentially very valuable service to our community members. With negative tests and improving symptoms, they may not have to be out of school or work for as long. I don't know if any of you have personal experience with trying to get a test, but it can be difficult. It can be time-consuming depending on where you go or if your doctor's office offers it or doesn't offer it. And we've seen that some people in our community have struggled with getting a test, and so we'll just wait out the 10 days and miss valuable school time.
All right, so I'm going to just talk to you a little bit about what we need to do to make this happen. First thing we had to do was register with the main DOE to just say that we were interested in doing that, and that's already been done. Next, we're just here asking you all if it's something that you will approve of, if you think it's a good idea, before we go further into this. We do need to get a CLIA waiver, which is a waiver that you need to get in order to collect laboratory specimens. And then we'll develop our program and procedures. We've already started that a little bit. We don't have the full details. So we just wanted to find out if it was a possibility first. We'll need to make sure that we're keeping our schools safe, also while providing this benefit to the community. We'll need to be educated on the procedure, and then we will report back with what our plan will be.
So what will it look like in the school environment? As I mentioned earlier, our initial use, recommended use for this will be for students or staff who develop COVID-like symptoms during the course of the school day. We're already talking with them, and we're dismissing them as quickly as possible, but this gives another piece of information for the individual. As Jesse had mentioned, that if they're positive, then we're able to start the contact tracing, the notification with the CDC, isolation immediately for that individual, and quarantining of those who are who need to be quarantined through our contact tracing. Starting things sooner instead of days and sometimes even up to a week later. Of course, with students, written parental consent will be obtained, and the testing will also be performed in a safe location. We have some visions as to how we're going to do that, and if you are interested in that, we can talk to you about that. There will be no charge to the individual for the testing. And a written report of the test results and recommended healthcare follow-up will be given immediately within that 15 to 20 minutes once we read the test results to the parent or to the staff member. And we're not going to change anything in our other usual protocols. 6 student or staff members will be dismissed per our usual protocol that we have in place now based on CDC and DOE recommendations. And of course, we're going to follow all CDC safety protocols. There is a little bit of a cost for us to start this up. For PPEs, they're a necessary part of the testing. I've talked with our facilities people. We have over 10,000 masks and gloves on hand, so that's not going to cost us anything. I think we have enough to start with. We have about 1,000 disposable face shields and gowns, and so we got a great stockpile for that as well. For testing supplies, the kits for the test will be provided to us. There are 40 tests per box. If we go ahead with this program, we will request our allotment from the Department of Education, and we will be allotted up to 10% of our population. So it's approximately 430 tests, or when you round up to the test kits, it'll be 440 kits or 11 boxes. Because we probably envision testing, like if any of you have gone to a test at a mobile unit, and so you're in your car, you do the testing there, that's a very safe spot to do the test. And so I see us inserting that swab into the testing kit right away, but if there's elements, snow, wind, or rain, we would need to put the swab into a transport tube, bring it inside, and then go ahead and process the sample. And so they're pretty cheap, but for 440 transport tubes, I'm not saying we're going to need that many, but the total cost is about $75. Disposal, we would need some biohazard bags and waste containers, the kind that you just put your foot on, it opens up, and you can just throw the sample in there. About $500 to supply our schools. Biohazard disposal, that's an unknown. My understanding is all our waste is treated as biohazard, so we might not need to do anything there, but we do need to do some more research. The CLIA waiver that Jen mentioned, this is a laboratory test, and so you do need to be certified through the federal government, and so we would get a waiver because we're not going to be that kind of a lab, and that's what the Department of Education is asking us to do, is get a CLIA waiver. So that's $180. We could process the application. They'll bill us later for that, just to let you know, Mr. Penna. And again, we possibly will do this during the school day, as we're dismissing them. Their parents pick up the student's in the car, we do the test with their consent. But as Mr. Penner also mentioned, we're looking at that community outreach from 3:30 to 5, I believe, Monday through Thursday. And for students or staff who called out that day and maybe not have a primary care provider, possibly the nurses going with the group and offering evening testing with appointments to those who may need that, again, for our students and staff. Any questions?
Mr. Deacon.
I want to thank you for your willingness to step up and think out of the box and do more than just your job to take care of our children in our school district. That's something you do all of the time, but this is just another instance of your doing more than just your job to really look out for our children and to help them stay in school, and I appreciate that. As we know, there are multiple tests out there. This is one. I think this test was developed in Maine, is that right? This company, it's a Maine company?
Abbott is from Maine. I'm not sure where it actually
Yeah.
was developed.
So some of the tests take quite long to do. I know there are people across the country that sometimes wait 1 or 2 weeks or whatever, quite lengthy periods to get results of tests. So the real advantage here is the speed at which you get a result. And of course, there may be what they call false positive, false negatives. And in his briefing today, the Maine Center for Disease Control Director talked about that. And that's really not significant. I mean, it's a concern, but the benefit is that many people who wouldn't know that they're testing positive find out. And we have the largest middle school in the state. We are the 3rd largest school district in the state. So if one or more of our students has the virus and the potential to infect others, the timely identification of that situation allows us to step in and minimize or reduce the problem to limit the spread. And so that's a very significant benefit that our district can get because of our size, because we're large. We have so many students, the largest middle school. It's important that we try to control the spread, and this testing allows us to do that. We've already seen earlier tonight the frustration of these students involved in sports who couldn't continue their education because of the, in part, we didn't have good testing and contact tracing and those things that have contributed to the spread of the virus. So allowing us to have this program gives us an opportunity to minimize, if not eliminate, but hopefully at least minimize interruptions to the education of our students that would otherwise take place by not having this testing. So I think it's a great thing to do. There's a cost to be associated with it, but all of us here, I think, in this room acknowledge that we want our kids in school, and this is a way to help them stay in school and stay safe. So I thank you for doing this, and I support the program.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments, Mr. Sargent?
For a cost of under $1,000 to protect our students and a rapid response and a rapid return on results, I think it's cost effective. I think we should go ahead and see if we can qualify for this and get the program started. And I would make a motion to that effect if there is any other comment.
Moved by Mr. Sargent, seconded by Mr. Deacon. Mrs. Bruni, I believe you had your hand up.
Thank you for your presentation, and I think it's wonderful. I just have a few questions for you. So one, you mentioned the community a lot, and so when I think of community, I think of like everybody that lives in the district. When you talk about the community, it's only staff and students that could get tested, that you would be testing. Okay. So where would the testing, right, so we have, 5 elementary schools, a middle school and a high school, and so would it be offered at every school, or would somebody have to then, like, go to the high school when school's done? Like, how would that work
Yeah,
from a
we're-
location?
Very good question. I mean, we're still evaluating what it's going to look like. There's the best vision would be every school would have the test kits, and we would order enough to make sure every school has the test kit, and all the nurses would be trained. But again, we have to remember, we still have to take care of the students during the daytime. So the schools where there's just one nurse, if you have a diabetic student who comes in who's dropping real low, and then you've got somebody waiting for a corona, for the COVID test, the nurse has to juggle that, and we have to plan and see how that's gonna look like. And then there's the other option, and we might do both, where with the community outreach program, they're gonna be in Standish on Monday, and then on Tuesday, they might be on Buxton, and we can let the parent know that this is another option if we're not able to do it in the school, or have the staffing to do it in the school, that in this evening, we're gonna be at XYZ school. And so that's what we're looking at as well.
Okay, and so it wouldn't be, because I think when you initially, where my mind went was that I say, hey, I have symptoms, not me, like I'm a student, right? Let's make pretend I'm a student. I'm a student and I say, hey, I have symptoms, I'm gonna go to the nurse's office. I initially thought that, like, oh, you're gonna test me then. They're not gonna test you during the day. What do we do with that student? Like, say I come in at 9 o'clock in the morning and I don't get out of school until 3, what's happening with me?
Right, so Jesse?
Sure, so we evaluate based on the lower frequency symptoms and the high
Okay.
risk. I always mess this up.
High risk and
High risk and low risk. So the high risk symptoms being the cough, the fever, the sore throat, what am I missing?
Chills.
The shortness of breath, and then all the low-risk symptoms. So if they had 2 or more low-risk symptoms, we could test them, but they would still be going home. If they had 1 or more high-risk symptoms, we would test them, but they would still be going home. And if it was just 1 low-risk symptom, they wouldn't qualify for the testing.
But you would test them, like, if I go in and I say, hey, I'm freezing, I have a headache, and I'm coughing all over you, right?
Yeah.
Like, are you gonna test me right then, or are you gonna wait until the end of the day?
No, we wouldn't wait till the end of the day. We would
You would test
isolate
them then.
you, and we would call your parent, and we would see if we had permission on file, or if the parent wanted to sign permission when they came to pick up the student. And then
Okay.
we would-
And so, okay, and I know that you're trying to work out the details, right? And so, like, I'm thinking, hey, would this be one of those things, like you send in like a doctor's form, or you send in the form saying, hey, it's okay to test my student, because if you couldn't, reach me, or if I was out of
Right.
town or whatever, so you would have to have something on file. It's not like, hey, I now have to run in and say it's okay for me to.
Again, Ms. Rooney, I think we're working on those details, but I think specifically, we're gonna have parents sign at the point of test.
At the
We're
point
not
of
gonna
test.
rely on having that on file and try
Okay.
to search for that, yeah.
Okay. And then the last question that I have is, like, what does the training look like, right? Like, do you have to have specialized training? So it would only be the nurses that are doing this, right? And I'm assuming the registered nurses?
Licensed personnel, yes.
I'm sorry?
Licensed personnel. So yes, it'll be the nurses, the RNs and the LPNs, and any other licensed personnel who may qualify. And so some of us have already attended some preliminary training with the Department of Education and the Department of Human Services. And so actually the DOE is helping us with templates for letters and consent forms and stuff like that, and helping us put together what is our program going to look like, or what should it look like. Abbott actually has online videos to go through for us to learn how to use it. And I actually just started developing a checklist for competency skills. So we're going to have to, so we'll have documentation on file that we've met certain competencies in order to then do this.
Okay.
And we're not alone. I think our medical director is online here with Ms. Napolitano, and so we're just
He's
not
not
going. He's not.
We lost him. We're way behind schedule from
I
when we
know.
thought we'd be on, so I think he just said he'd let him know how it went.
Got it. That's perfect. But we do, part of the requirements is having a healthcare provider, having your medical director oversee this as well. So it's not like we're going rogue with this. We do have a physician who's
Right.
working with us through this process. But definitely competencies will be involved for staff.
Okay. And the last question I have, are there other schools, like, in the district that are around us that are either already approved or are seeking to do this as well?
We know of 12 schools that have applied for the CLIA waiver in the state of Maine, 12 districts, but none of them are really close.
Approximately 70 schools have expressed interest in the state of Maine, with 12, you said 12 going ahead with the CLIA waiver already.
I think part of that answer is the question, the superintendent's group to meet, and I meet with both groups. I mean, they're shying away from that because their fear is overwhelming the nurses with their work, unknown. Yet, I discussed that with our nurses, and we have our meetings throughout the week with our doctor on our meetings, and we all brought those concerns and raised them, but I think they're to credit to them, they're rising above all of that potential overwhelmness and those challenges we may have because they feel like what our community needs and that we don't have access like other communities may have access, and they're willing to take at least the next steps and continue to study to look at it as a result of that. And I think other communities are just pretty much saying we're not going to do that, we're not going to go there, but these guys have been very strong advocating, again, for our families and for our students, and I applaud them for that work. And so.
Thanks, Trevor. I just wanted to add too, right now in the 4 towns in our district, there is no place you can get a test. And it is a hardship for people that live in the far reaches of our community to get a test. And we have kids missing a lot of school because they have a sore throat, and we can't let them back in without either a negative test or a doctor's note with a different diagnosis. So instead of coming back when the sore throat is over in a few days with that note, they are missing a whole 10 days of school.
And through the Walgreens program, I was really hoping that the Buxton Walgreens would kind of solve that problem for us and be an advocate with us that we could partner with. Unfortunately, this Walgreens in Buxton has a staffing issue, so they don't do any COVID testing, whether it's the PCR or the ID Now or even the Binex Now. There's only 2 places in Cumberland County that offer the Binex Now, and I believe that is Yarmouth and Scarborough, maybe. And then in York County, there's one Walgreens, which I think actually is in Saco. Is that considered York County? That is offering the Binex Now testing.
Thank you. Ms. Forestieri.
I just had a quick question. So you said this would be for people who are showing symptoms. Would you also be able to do it for people through contact tracing? So for the girls' soccer team, would they be able to go back to school sooner?
Yeah, right now, the state of Maine does have that option for this particular testing for contact tracing, but it's really because there's limited amount of tests, and I say there's 400,000 tests in the state of Maine, but they're going to get used up pretty quickly. So as far as those critical infrastructure people like EMTs, emergency room folks, schools are listed in that critical infrastructure. It could possibly be used for daily surveillance of somebody who has come in close contact, or a teacher, not a student, but a teacher who is critical to the needs. And without that teacher being present, if they have no symptoms, they did have close contact with an individual, but they have no symptoms, and on a daily basis could go through this testing for that particular day. Now, that doesn't absolve them from their quarantine that they still have to do. So when they go home, they have to stay in quarantine. They can't go out. They can come to work. And then if they still have no symptoms the next day, they would have to get tested. I'm not sure where, again, in the programming, where we'll have that time to do that, but it could be an option.
Great. Ms. Harriman.
So I just had a question. So if a student were to get the test, is there any way you would coordinate with their doctor or their pediatrician about it? So if the student calls their doctor and asks for a test, but then they realize they could get one at the school, is there any way you'd coordinate to make sure there's not any misinformation or anything?
Oh, exactly, and that has come to our mind as well. And so part of the template that I started for the intake or the questionnaire or the consent form is having the physician's information on there. Part of our responsibility would also be whether the test is negative or positive, we would have access to the state's. There's going to be a database that's directly connected with the CDC, so we are to record results immediately into that database, as well as we would coordinate with faxing the test results to the physician. Of course, we would put ownership onto the parent and the staff member to provide this information to your physician, but as a double check, we will also take on that responsibility. Now, at the high school, there are many people who don't have a physician, so then we could, especially if they need follow-up, we can then help with case management and help with that process for the individual, and Jen sees that a lot at the high school.
Great, thank you. Mrs. Atkinson.
Thank you. I have a couple questions. I'm curious, what is the false positive rate for this particular test?
All right, so there's actually a really good sensitivity rate. For actually the accuracies for positives, the sensitivity rate is 97.5%. As for negatives, the specificity is about 98.5 accuracy on that for negative tests. It's just as good as the PCR test that is done through LabCorp or Quest or through the state of Maine. The numbers as far as the other rapid test, I'm just drawing a blank on the name of the other test that Abbott does provide. The numbers are about the same, so it's statistically, it's just as good as the PCR test. Now, if you're positive, there's follow-up recommended to have the PCR test. So if you're positive, you're assumed you're positive. And if you're negative, and you continue to have, or there's a concern that your symptoms are such that, hey, you know, gosh, this sounds like COVID and it walks like COVID, it's probably COVID, then recommendations will be to get that PCR test. Originally, the guidelines were 48 hours, but now they want you to get that COVID test within 24 hours.
Okay, so if a student comes into the nurse's office with multiple symptoms and they get a negative COVID test from this rapid test, are they then able to attend school the next day, even with those symptoms, because they've tested negative?
So they would be sent home, and then we would work with the parent to make sure that the symptoms are improving before they could return to school.
Okay, so regardless of a negative test, they're still going to be discluded from school.
Sent home that day.
Okay.
Right.
I would just voice my own concern. I think anytime the term collecting specimens is used in a public school, I don't find that appropriate. I think it's concerning. I think all you have to do is look at what happened in Sanford with the wrong children getting vaccinated against parental consent to know that the accidents happen. And I think that the nursing staff is going to have their hands full just symptom screening and dealing with cold and flu. I have no idea how you would handle the uptick. I just don't know if we're prepared for that, and if the clinical staff could even handle an overwhelming amount of students and staff probably looking for testing. So that would be my concern about that. But I do thank you for your presentation.
I presume that if a student didn't exhibit symptoms but had been exposed, that they'd be eligible to take the test.
Right now, it's only for symptomatic students and staff.
So if a student has an uncle in the house who was diagnosed, they wouldn't get a test if they asked for it.
They wouldn't get this test at school.
And students who test positive then they get a case manager out of CDC?
That's the gold standard plan, but the CDC's.
Thank you.
CDC is very busy, so this is good information to give to the doctor. So that's why we can immediately isolate. So versus waiting to hear from the CDC or going to your doctor the next day or the day after, think about where that individual might go within that 48 hours. And so if you get a positive, if you're symptomatic and you get a positive test, then you are considered positive. And as I mentioned, we will notify CDC. We will instruct the individual and their family member that the individual has to go into immediate isolation. And anybody who is considered, we can start our contact tracing right then and there. And we would tell the family that, you know, anyone else in contact your close contacts outside of school. We'll deal with the contacts inside of school. And then immediately have them quarantined. So again, that process starts. And what's key, you know, we're seeing a surge. What's key right now is identification. The state of Maine has one of the best rates for testing and the volumes that we're testing. But if we can even get to them sooner with an accurate test such as this just helps, again, our community and hopefully keep our people safe, healthy, and our schools open longer.
Mrs. Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just curious, how many Have we had a lot of kids that have had to go home over the past few months, and the parents have chosen to not get them tested? What is the ratio of, like, I'm just curious if parents are choosing to do it more than not and having them stay home?
I think that's mixed. I could speculate at a percentage for what I've seen at the middle school. We did take a look at the numbers of the students who called out and who we've dismissed that would qualify for this test based on their symptoms. And that average number in the district is almost 1 to 3 per school. So obviously at the middle school, more people would qualify, like 1 to 3 students would qualify per day. At some of the other schools, the averages were a little bit lower, but district-wide, we were looking at about, again, 7 to 12 kids district-wide who would qualify.
I've had a handful of families who either their doctor's office doesn't offer the testing, or they don't have a primary care doctor, or by the time they got the test and then got the results, the 10 days had already elapsed, so it wasn't.
So you don't really know who would have chosen to do it if they had the opportunity rather
Right.
than. So I share Mrs. Atkinson's concerns here too. I think we have no idea how many children are actually walking around with COVID already, and many of them are asymptomatic. So my concern is if they come to you with a sniffle, I know you don't do it for just one symptom, but I'm afraid that if we test more kids than we are right now, that we might get more positives, and I would be concerned that that is going to shut down the school more quickly than really necessary.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Mr. Marian, how do you vote?
I'm not voting,
Okay.
I'm
So, he does not need a reason, Mr. Deacon. We've been over this.
right, one is wrong, that's the problem, it's hard for me to decide which is the right thing to do, so I don't wanna make a bad decision either way if I don't vote,
Thank you. So we had two opposed, 1 abstention. The motion passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and we'll keep the board updated on the progress, and Mr. Penna we'll keep him apprised of this as well. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, we'll now turn the floor over to Mr. Penna and his team for an update on the community forums held to gain staff and parent feedback on the district's hybrid learning plan and approval of the superintendent's recommendation to adjust the 2020-2021 school calendar for December, January, February, and March.
Thank you. Thank you. So I think all of you know that we've been doing these community forums again. We've been out there since this summer, so we've gathered a lot of information. And the idea here, of course, is to give the board the information that we've gathered out into the community to make sure that you have the right information to make the best decision possible about moving forward based on what our recommendation is going to be tonight. I'll bring you through the process from beginning to end, so you have a sense of what it was that our goal in going back out was to say, we've been doing the month to month, as I refresh your memory on that, and we said that can be disruptive to people. I think it was the right decision this summer when we made that decision because we couldn't tell where it was going. But it seems to be now at this point in time that we need to make a decision moving us into the for the complete second trimester, so families can make the decisions they need to make, and the staff has a clear understanding of what's going to happen from day to day in the school and not worry about what's going to happen each month. So the big picture and the things we went out to when we decided to go out and do the forums, the big things we were looking at are 2 major issues, right? 3 actually. What's COVID doing? Where is it? What's happening in our communities? What's happening statewide? What are those big concerns? In-person instruction, which we know is the best level of instruction, whatever that might look like moving forward, was a big issue. In dealing with teacher prep time at the elementary level, which we were not meeting our contractual obligations under the conditions. We were doing prep planning and it was working, but it really wasn't under the condition. It wasn't on a daily basis. It was all stacked in the end of the week. And it's not really the way it was designed to deliver prep time for teachers. So we wanted to address those issues and going out and saying what would be the new plan that we might address. or we might suggest to the community to see what their responses would be about where we're going to go next in helping to increase that instruction for students. So I think we mentioned most of those. So it was mentioned at the last meeting, like, what are some of the really good things that have happened in the system? And every time I present, we add things to this list. Like, the things are going well. I want to just mention, we have not shut down. We've had a couple little cases, and our schools continue to operate. And that's a benefit, that's a tribute to everyone working in the system making that happen. And so schools around us have shut down. They've had their short shutdowns. We've had none. And so, again, I thank all the people around us doing the things and working as hard as they are. And again, you could read that list. I mean, I think that there are some major things on there. I think the parents have been really outspoken about the weekly updates and feeling really good about what they're getting from teachers regularly. Our teachers have improved in their technology use. The big issue of teachers had to prioritize. You're not going to get all the curriculum taught in 2 days a week of in-person instruction. So they had to prioritize. That's a good thing because they had to really begin looking at what's that critical content students need in order to be successful with this, with what standard we're working on and what standard they're going to. Very important part. So a lot of good conversation, discussion, dialogue has happened professionally. Again, students learning how to become better independent learners, we think is a strength. Moving forward in their life, there's going to be lots of opportunity where they're going to have to do things independently, take responsibility on their own, seek information, and we think that that's a positive thing where students are learning that sitting and getting is just not the way they're going to gather information. It shouldn't be the way they gather information. Definitely moving forward, they're going to have to be more aggressive about that. And again, speaking in class is becoming a much more common thing for our students and feeling much more comfortable speaking in the smaller groups. Behavior incidents have seriously decreased. Yes, we have half the students in the building at any given time, or less than that actually with the remotes. But students, I think with the pressure of not having the school as large as it is, with 1,156 students at the high school, we're not having that at any given time. Students don't have that need to do some of the things they've done in the past and speak and act out. And teachers have been able to identify issues earlier and address things earlier with children. So we've been very successful on that front. Again, parent engagement has been off the charts. It's been very significant, and we're happy about that. Again, a positive teaching and learning culture has happened. The teaching and learning on remote instruction is improving every single day we do that. And teachers are learning better remote instruction strategies, and students are learning better resources. And they're getting resources to students. So a lot of good things that have happened, and where we are. Again, we keep saying we don't want to stay here because that's not what the design of the whole education system is, and we think we can do better, and we're going to continue to strive to do better. So this is what we've done over the last 2 weeks. We've done 4 parent forums, community meetings, both online and in person, and we've gotten a lot of parent feedback and input, and we gave them the opportunity to. The plan that we rolled out when we went out there was for parents to look at what I thought was on paper was the absolute best plan possible in order to get students with more in-person instruction. So we went out there with that proposal to our communities, knowing that it could be challenging, but knowing it's also the best thing that we should be doing. And it was a 2-phase process that we decided that I wanted to present to people. That phase 1 would be moving into the alternating day schedule, which would be students coming to school Monday, Wednesday, and Friday one week, and Tuesday, Thursday the following week. The second part of that phase in would be when we had all the technology that we'd have synchronous instruction. So every teacher will have the remote technology in the camera systems in their classrooms, either wired in or portable. And the whole idea of that is the student would be in school one day, they'd be synchronous the next day. So they would have 5 days of in-person instruction with teachers, whether in person or they're at home, and that would build a system that we felt would be the absolute best. Teachers would plan for 1 week with all the kids because the kids would still be cohorted. They wouldn't be in the building all at one time. They still would be separated out, but they would get that continuous instruction from their teachers, and we'd keep moving and hopefully stay safe and keep school in session. So that's what we rolled out, knowing that there were going to be some challenges to it. And we immediately heard those challenges in the first couple forums. We went out and it was loud and clear, and the number one issue was the child care challenges. Obviously, there are going to be some child care when a rotating schedule like that. It's hard for parents to plan that and to be able to get, care appropriately. And so we are well aware of that. There was some stress around the student schedule, that this week I go to school Monday, Wednesday, Friday, next week I go to school Tuesday, Thursday. There was some stress around that. Obviously, we rolled it out believing that students would ultimately understand that and pick that up and easily with a printed out calendar be successful with that. But again, this is feedback from the community, from staff, from our community members, our families and members. They felt that those things were a little overwhelming and putting more stress on students than necessary. There's not consecutive days of in-person instruction like we have now, so they felt that was a little bit of a drawback, even though they would be gaining the day of instruction and consistency with synchronous instruction, but synchronous instruction wasn't in place right now, so they felt that that particular schedule was more challenging in that regard, given all the other variables. And again, the inconsistency for parents and their work schedule obviously was a challenge, and we were well aware of that going out into the community talking about it. So it was clear after our first 2 meetings that this schedule is probably not going to be feasible. And I think that if you followed any of the stuff going on Facebook and those other things that people were talking about, at least even in our forums, they were talking about the fact that we were showing up, even though we were taking our evenings to go out into the community to get feedback from people. People thought we were rolling out a plan that we were going to just implement anyhow, which we continue to say that we're not spending the time to do this to just implement something we want to implement. If we wanted to do that, we could have done that by sitting in our office and never going out to the community. The purpose of going to the community is to see what the feelings are of the community, what ideas you have about improvements, given the things we're trying to repair and fix and get students more in-person instruction. Can we get some ideas that we don't have that somebody else maybe will throw at us? So we were responsive to that. We heard people, we heard what they were saying. We said it doesn't make any sense to show up and go out to Leamington, our third presentation, and tell them the same thing that we've told the last 2 and had the same feedback that this isn't going to work for these reasons. So we altered that conversation with the Leamington community and had that conversation with them, and we landed on the fact that 3 days of instruction we could manage that if we added the extra day in of instruction. And instead of having Friday a remote day, make Wednesday the day that would be the middle day, so students would go to school Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So they would still get 3 days of instruction in the continuity of instruction if we went to that particular schedule. And we heard parents in that community felt really comfortable that was a positive step in the right direction that they could accept. Would there still be some childcare potential challenges? Yes, but they were willing to overcome those if we were going to go into that system, as opposed to the other system that we are proposing. So we got positive reactions from parents about moving that, and again, moving that Friday from remote to make 5 days of in-person instruction for our students. So as we get through, I'll show you the schedule, but they're going to have either 3 days one week and 2 days the next, but it's going to be 5 days of instruction, and Friday will no longer be a remote day of instruction. And so we know parents are going to have some work to do. We heard that, and we want to be respectful of that because families have to be able to meet the system that we're recommending. It is another change in routine that people have built. We heard that loud and clear. Students are in a routine now. They kind of know how to learn in this system. They're kind of accustomed to that. Teachers are accustomed to the particular schedule, even though it was harder initially. So we know that, there are going to be some adjustments moving into this system, but it still answers our beginning premise of how do we increase student in-person instruction for our students, because we think that's the best way to continue them and give them what they need in the curriculum for the year. So again, making Wednesday the alternating day for both PE and Scots was a way to do that. Alternating Wednesdays is also preferable to the medical team. When we talked to them about the potential schedule, they like that because it still allows for those several consecutive days of students being out of school in cohorts. Cohorts not mixing, and it allows for us still to have those days where students, if they do have symptoms or keeping them away, which is our initial premise when we started the school, trying to make sure we stayed in cohorts, and then had students that were out of school for a period of time in order if they had symptoms, that they wouldn't be bringing those back into the school. So it met a lot of the criteria we were looking for, but making a little bit of progress in the system that we currently have. So again, we have to recognize the continued increase in COVID cases in Maine. It becomes an issue. So doing anything that needs to be our staple of saying whether we're going to do this or what recommendation we're going to make. It allows our pilot team, we have a pilot team established. Lori has a group, I think 14 or 15 teachers that have signed up to pilot the team. We also have 21 AV systems that have been wired in the schools, in the classroom, every AP classroom. There's 8 at the middle school, and there's 2 at every elementary school of wired-in systems. And so those are not the only people. And Lori also has 14 people who said, yes, I would like to be part of your pilot team for synchronous instruction, because synchronous learning is different learning for students and it's different teachers for teachers. So a lot of districts have just thrown the camera or the computer in front of the teachers and said, have at it, do your synchronous instruction. Kids are at home learning, kids are in your class learning, and they're going to do both. We've said we're not doing that. It's not good instructional practice, and we haven't done that. And so we're committed to the fact of getting our technology and doing our PD so that our teachers are prepared to teach in this particular model, because it's different than having all the kids in front of you. We also need to spend some time talking to students about how do you become a student and online learner. It's a different skill, and we need to talk about that, and we need to teach them that as well. They don't just come with that. So we have time to work on those things, and that's what we want to do. Teachers, we needed to provide that additional time for planning for elementary teachers. They only had planning time on Friday, and so that's not really how the planning time should work. So again, these are all our factors or recommendations. Technology shifted away from the OWL. We thought the OWL was going to be what we're going to get for the synchronous learning. That went away when they said they wanted half on our order, and half when we placed our order and half when they shipped them with no shipping date guaranteed. So we began looking at, there are other systems out there. The OWL was good, we liked it, but there's other systems that are comparable. So we're backed up a little bit. We're experimenting with a couple right now that we have on site. So we're looking at some other systems that'll do pretty much what the OWL does. In some cases, even has some better components to it that we kind of like. So it did force us to look at other systems. We are happy with that. But again, our planning of having all the OWLs currently on campus is we don't have them, because now we've gone through different systems. That also played into the idea. Remember I told you initially, we went down with the idea that we do phase 1 of changing the schedule, phase 2 of synchronous instruction. So that would back that up. So they're all reasons for things that we want to make sure that we were responsive to the community, responsive to the stakeholders, the things we heard, and then our plan comes from that. So we say, our recommendation tonight is that we stay with our plan through December 22nd. And that was a recommendation. Initially, we said December 8th. We moved off that mark because parents need to make some decisions on childcare. They need to make some adjustments to their care. We need to be responsive to that. We also see COVID cases that continue to increase daily. So we want to slow down our process, but we're not going to stop our process. So we're going to give it time. And we also know that this is a time of year where there's going to be a lot of socialization. We don't know what that's going to look like. And there's been a lot of conversation about, what Thanksgiving and Christmas will look like. So this gives us all that safety of time, and we think that's really important. So we said we'll keep our plan right till the holiday break. Upon the return, January 2nd, that's when we'll add the additional in-person day, so students can get adjusted to that, teachers, families, caretakers, all the things that need to happen by adding in the additional day for our students. Again, we're going to continue collaborating with our technology to seek, look at our options for synchronous instruction and start getting that in place. We've already secured several contracts with the COVID dollars on professional development for our staff. So it's going to give us a little more time to work on those things. And again, we're going to continue to work with we have to increase our in-person instruction at grade levels for specialized populations. That's one thing we're going to continue to work on. I told you that we're going to, we can in pockets maybe able to bring a few more students in, but cross the scale of bringing grade levels in, especially right now, is not likely to happen, especially where they've reduced to 50 in any given space, which again has impacted our ability to serve lunch, and then of course the bus restrictions. So, but we're going to continue to look at specialized populations about how we may be able to work with in smaller groups and bring some people in if that's possible at all. But right now, the biggest piece of our recommendation is, again, the January 2nd and adding the 5th day of instruction in for students, and then building that synchronous instructional environment and the PD that goes along with that. And giving the community time to to make those adjustments. So what our recommendation is on that is that we're going to suspend late arrival days. That came up a little bit. Like people said, well, if you're going to add Wednesday in as a day, are they still going to, they're going to start 2 hours later because of professional development? We're going to suspend that for January and February. We're not going to offer those. And our next day would be our March 11th professional development day. So we would have the consistency that we need through January and February, and then by March, we'll be in place for the, we'll have our March 11th day, and then we'll have a new recommendation for you by then for third trimester as to what's going to happen. And again, COVID will drive that. It'll be probably either we're sticking with what we have because those are the conditions we have, and we'll get through the end of the year, or we'll have a new recommendation for the third trimester of the school year. We definitely should have some synchronous instruction in place by the third trimester. That's our goal. Again, this is what we're shooting for to make sure that can happen. But again, I can't tell you that tonight. This is what synchronous instruction will look like by third trimester, but definitely is our goal to put that in play for the third trimester for teachers and students. We'll come back in March with our final recommendation, so this will take us through March. And then again, you know our commitment. I've been talking about that every meeting, about our synchronous instruction goal, and move some of the fears people have, but give them the professional development they need for teaching. Again, consider our options when we have options to bring people in and continue and begin our discussion. I started one of my goals, as I talked about, was to develop a BE curriculum for remote learning for students and a remote pathway. And I told you those numbers, 8,000 kids are missing in the state of Maine under the current enrollment system. So things have changed drastically. I think we're going to need to offer a remote system. There are going to be students that may or may not want to come back to school. We've created these conditions, and I think we have a responsibility to move forward with them. So I have had an administrative meeting with Lori, the curriculum coordinators, the other day, and we talked, and we did a little workshop on looking at what remote instruction might look like in Bonnie Eagle, and what are the things I need to do first. And I'm setting up a team in order to work with me on begin exploring it. I've also explored with DOE. It's not a given that we can have a remote learning pathway, so I've also explored with DOE, and they actually have a group that's looking at that possibility. So I'll have to get approval from them, but our work needs to start now. So we'll continue with that idea on hopefully having a remote pathway for our students moving forward in the future. For the students that are currently on our remote plan that may or may not want to come back to school when things return to whatever normal looks like in the future. So those are our next steps. We've done a lot of work with it. We're going to continue to do a lot of work with it, and I feel that gives you the best information to have your discussion about what you'd like to see happen for the next trimester of the school year in MSAD 6. I think we did a lot of good community feedback, and we appreciate that. And but it's time well spent.
Great, thank you. Any questions or comments for the superintendent? Mrs. Bruni?
I would like to make a motion to move forward with a recommendation from the superintendent.
Thank you. Moved by Mrs. Bruni, seconded by Mr. Sargent. Any further discussion? Mrs. Atkinson?
Yes, can you tell me if you've had any concerns or pushback from the teaching staff at all regarding synchronous learning and what those might be?
No, there's definitely concerns that they have about synchronous learning. Most of it is, again, they don't know how necessarily to teach in on a synchronous learning environment because it's different. Secondly, they've seen their colleagues on each side of our district who have seen their colleagues being given a computer and 2 screens and said, you've got kids at remote, you have kids in class, and you figure out how to teach all of them. The models they have seen have not been good. They're not untethered from their computers, and teachers are working really hard. We're going to see some more models in the coming weeks, so that's their biggest challenge and the biggest concerns, and we're trying to answer those concerns, which is why we also put quite a bit of money into PD to make sure our teachers have prep before we put a synchronous learning environment in front of them by not preparing them at all, which is what they've seen happen in other communities around us that they're fearful of.
So as a mom of young children, I'm trying to imagine what synchronous learning would look like for a second grader trying to follow along in a classroom full of other second graders. Have you addressed at the elementary level some of those challenges?
Yeah, we have, and we're going to talk about it. Lori, you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, we're actually visiting
Waterboro Elementary tomorrow. We have five people going tomorrow, and then I have 5 people visiting Alfred Elementary on Thursday. I've had conversations with both of those principals planning these visits. We're also visiting on Friday, Kennebunk Middle School, and then a week from Friday, Kennebunk High School. And then we're going to do some virtual visits where some of the people on the pilot group will actually join classes as a student virtually so they can kind of see the student side of it. All of them have every district has approached it differently, so I think we'll get different things. So for example, 57 has cameras, like we're looking into purchasing. Kennebunk uses no cameras, but they have smart boards in every room, and they have 2 devices for each teacher, so they have 2 computers to work off. 55 has nothing at the moment, but is working on getting cameras, but their teacher started with just 1 laptop and just Google Meets. So I think between all of those, we'll get to kind of see some of the pros and cons. I'm confident that the teacher, I don't know if all the teachers will be 100% honest when we go visit, because, they'll want to paint a positive picture. But I think also just, like we've gotten a lot of feedback, and big concerns in other districts was technology not always working, and that it's exhausting for the teacher. I think there's also a lot of things we'll need to work through. So many details to work through that we aren't ready to answer the questions yet. For example, what age level is it appropriate to start, right? We don't know if it's going to be a K-5 thing or just a 4-5 thing, or, how often? Is it once a week? Is it every day? Is it, is it just, and what's an appropriate amount of time for kids to be engaged? And then what time do they step away if they're at home and do independent work? So there's a lot of things to work out. It's not like,
One answer for the whole grade.
it's not one answer for K-12. It's not one answer for every content area. I think that we would have to work on what's feasible and what's appropriate, what's a benefit to kids. If it's not a benefit, why would we do it? So that, I think there's a lot to work through. That's why we're sort of taking this as sort of one exploration. I keep saying we're exploring synchronous learning. We're looking at how we can implement it well. It's not here's your camera, here's 15 minutes of training how to use it, have fun, which is what we know has happened around us, which has got our teachers extremely nervous. There's a lot of etiquette and expectation stuff to deal with too. We are developing a document right now. The pilot group is is working on creating a document that has expectations for kids and expectations for staff as to what happens in these meetings and how they work. The OWL camera, the newer camera system has that we're looking at. I don't know for sure if we've ordered it yet. Has sort of I think just make people feel better. Has a way to turn off sort of a lens cap thing. If they want to just have the audio and not the visual, that's a concern. I think the audio is a huge benefit, more so than the video even. It's less about being able to see everything going on in the room, and it's more about being able to see the teacher at the board or to see the teacher reading a story. But it's more about the kids being able to talk to each other, and that's the benefit. It's the microphone and speaker more than it is the visual. But they have a lot of things that I think they can learn from visiting schools that have already worked out some of the bugs. How to handle a discipline situation, or how do you, how much time? Is it 15 minutes of instruction and that's it? And then you turn them off, or what?
So I just,
long answer, I know. Sorry.
No, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So Paul, what you're asking us is that we continue with the schedule as it is for the following month or so, actually a little longer than a month. And then you're asking that we start to implement this rotating day
January 4th.
after
upon our
Christmas
return.
break.
Yeah, January 4th, yeah.
So
after
I
the
just,
holiday break. Yeah.
personally, I remain hopelessly optimistic that something might change, and I was really comfortable with the month-by-month basis. I think it put a lot of discussion back on the table and allowed the board members to get an update. So I personally wouldn't be comfortable in voting on anything that takes us all the way into March, because I can't foresee the circumstances and what they're going to be. So I'd rather address it monthly in the hopes that we might be able to get some more school days in person out of that versus just voting them all away right now. But that's my personal opinion. Thanks.
Mr. Deacon.
Thank you. At the beginning of the year, when the schedule was announced, one of the considerations was cleaning the buildings.
Mhm.
And having Friday as a remote day allowed a thorough cleaning of the building, and a Saturday and a Sunday to elapse so that not only was the building cleaned, but a time period for which the building could clean itself. Has anything changed with respect to our ability to clean buildings or our understanding of the longevity of the virus on surfaces and things like that?
Yeah, I think what's changed is that we have better knowledge and information about the virus and how it lives and where it lives and the work we're doing and the automation of they are cleaning and disinfecting the buildings every night across the board. They're not leaving that. Our early thinking was that they needed that one day to do this deep cleaning, get in and do more work than they normally do, and rest the buildings. But that is not it's as significant of an issue. Is it an issue? We could say that it is, but we've not seen any significant changes as a result of that because they're cleaning and disinfecting the buildings every night. What they're doing on Fridays is more of the things that they don't get a chance to do because of when they go and they spray all this room, they come in and spray it, they have to let it set for 10 minutes to kill any of the virus, and then they got to come down and wipe it all down because as we've seen, it fades clothing and other product. Right? Things happen when that disinfectant is left on surfaces. So now they have to go through and wipe surfaces again to avoid that after 10 minutes. So they're doing all of that throughout the night. So what's not happening is that, maybe some of the vacuuming or the wall washings or the wipe downs of the lockers, things that they had time to do before, they're now doing on Fridays, but not necessarily to do with dealing with the coronavirus issues or the cleaning and disinfecting. And on top of that, we've also seen some increases of need that our staff need to access the buildings more and more on Friday because to do appropriate planning and to be organized for students, you need your materials that are in your room and not at your house. So things have changed only because our information and knowledge have changed, and the maintenance department has learned a lot more about how to deal with that on an ongoing basis than we initially thought that we had coming on in the middle of the summer when we were trying to make these decisions. So.
Follow up, a sense of people having to deal with future shock, things always changing, and having a set schedule allows some consistency so that families, employers, as well as the school district can plan its operations. And could you just clarify for me the sense of what parents were saying, for example, the problems in having to consider changing schedules which would affect care for their children at home and their ability to go to work. And then if it wasn't set in somewhat, if not concrete, at least a fairly consistent basis, by having it subjected to monthly change, doesn't that create a lot of stress and problems? Did parents share
That's what we
concerns like
heard.
that?
That's what we heard when we were in the community, that created a little bit, again, I went out with the idea that I was doing something different than the other superintendents. They were making decisions like, we're good until Thanksgiving or Christmas. And I was like, I don't want to say that because I have no idea where we're going. And so, but what we heard in the communities is that has caused them a little bit of stress, as well as teachers, because they don't know what's going to happen the second meeting of every board, the second board meeting of every month, that we may change our direction and do something different, and then they're expected to shift. So we heard a fair amount of that, which is upon our recommendation, saying we need to stabilize, let people know, we can see the trends of what's happening. Not a lot of changes likely going to happen between now and March, and we'll know by March what our next steps will be. It's 2 months of what we're doing after the holidays. And so, again, a lot of superintendents are talking about the issue of whether they should be shutting down, and some are deciding to shut down between Thanksgiving and Christmas because of the socialization that happens during those holidays. And so they don't want to have a thing. We're not talking about doing that either. We said, let's just stabilize and get through to our holiday break, and then come back with our 5th day of instruction, work for January and February through that, with a new idea that by March we'll be prepared for trimester 3 to say what we should do next.
Mrs. Bruni.
So, so I appreciate Ms. Atkinson's concern around March. And so I just think about this, Paul, from myself is I work for a company that back in October said, we're not going back to work until April, right? Like that's a long time. People are like, are you kidding me? But that's the intent, that they won't require us to come back to the office until April. If all of a sudden COVID goes away and we can change things, then that's obviously open to change, right?
Right.
But I think and so I'm hoping that ours would be the same. Like if it's miraculous, we wake up tomorrow and they're like, stop wearing masks, like it's COVID's over, you wouldn't hold us to this March thing.
No.
If conditions change drastically, but in assuming that things continue along the way that they are, this is our plan until March. If something happens in
I'll be back.
January, you'll be back and say, hey, you know what, we were wrong, like things have drastically
Absolutely.
improved, and so we're gonna go back to.
Right. And then understanding that people are gonna have to make adjustments, and we'll have to adjust to that as well.
But the
given time.
adjustment is
But I'm
good.
not gonna I'm not falling off the face of the earth and going on to do something else between now and March. We're gonna continue to work on that, as well as our synchronous instruction, and the other things that we're working on, monitoring that. And I said this every parent meeting, as soon as we get students back in person, the best way possible, we're gonna do it. Which is why we're pushing synchronous instruction the right way so aggressively, because we think it's gonna be best for students ultimately if we sustain this for the rest of the year. And I can't predict that either.
But I think that this is good from a parent standpoint, because they're not going, hey, daycare provider, I'll let you know next month what the
Right.
school, the board
We've
decides.
heard
This
that
way
in the
they say,
community. Yeah.
we know until March, we're doing the right thing from a parent standpoint. And the best thing that's gonna happen, I mean, I think parents will be like, oh gosh, you can't make my kids go back to school every day because I think that anything that changes or deviates from the plan, other than they make us 100% remote, would be a positive in the event of
Yeah.
the parent's
We hope
eye.
so.
So
Yeah.
I think it's the right thing to do.
Any final comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion? Any opposed? It is unanimous. Thank you, Mr. Penna. I'll now turn the floor over to Mr. Moran for the Finance and Facilities Committee report of November 4th.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. November the 4th, 4 p.m., the Finance Facilities Committee met at Central Office. All of the participants in the committee were here, plus our student representative, along with Mr. Brockman and Mr. Haru. Under the very fine guidance of Mr. Brockman and Mr. Haru, the Finance and Facilities Committee is going along very nicely. We don't have any real dangerous things that are happening or really any real concerns right now. The facilities, Mr. Haru has submitted us with a laundry list of things that he's done around the district in our buildings, and it's in your packet. I would encourage you to take a look at that if you're interested and see what's happening there and what efforts are being taken. We reviewed the accounts payable and the payable and the payroll, and we approved those after review, and Mr. Brockman gave us an update on the top 25 accounts payable expenditures. We reviewed some of those, had some pretty large numbers in them, and those are also in your packet. Mr. Brockman reported the general fund looks well, it's going over good. He does not see any difficulties at this point that would raise any flags. He said he's keeping a close eye on the salary accounts, and he noted that the district is still carrying expenses for the CARES Act fund. And the CARES Act fund is a real big headache. Mr. Brockman, he's trying to spend money with a very strict policies given to us by the federal government and state government, but those are looking well too, and we've got some really big projects underway. So that's the report, and we adjourned at 5 p.m.
Thank you, Mr. Moran. Are there any questions or comments?
Can I just add that, just a credit to Finance Committee and also Mr. Brockman. A lot of districts, as you heard, this COVID money and how we're running things, by December 30th, the COVID money it has to be spent. And what's happened with a lot of the one-year contract people in every other district they're talking about is that they don't know how they're going to fund their people, and what the superintendent's meetings are talking about is that those people will be released December 30th. We didn't go down that pathway either. And Mr. Brockman has worked through making sure that those people, like he said, you have to have those teachers for the year. You can't just decide at the end of the year that December 30th that we're all done with them. So credit to the Finance Committee and Mr. Brockman making that happen. We are unique again in comparison to districts around us that are releasing those people December 30th or coming up with some other way, but they're talking about it in both superintendent meetings, and I'm not, and crickets when it comes to me, because we have that solved for here and now because it's necessary to do the work that we're doing in this particular system. So I want to thank the committee and Mr. Brockman for that great work, and it's pretty significant when you look at the scale of it.
Mr. Sargent.
Just one thing on the finance and facilities. According to Mr. Brockman, the only thing that we have to worry about right now is the food line expenses, because we currently aren't collecting money from our students. And we don't know at this time if we're going to get money back from the government. And if we don't, that line may be overspent by the end of the year. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none. Mr. Carlo for the Policy Committee report of November 2nd.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On November 2nd, the Policy Committee met at Central Office. The committee meeting began at 4:33, and all committee members, along with the Assistant Superintendent and our recorder, Ms. Anderson, were present. Our first policy that we discussed was JIH, questioning and searches of students. The committee amended this policy in order to codify current record-keeping practices associated with student searches. We specifically amended the policy to require the documentation of the time, day, what was searched, and the grounds for reasonable suspicion, and what items, if any, were seized for every student search. It's on the agenda today for first reading. The second item that we reviewed was JIH-A, the corresponding procedure towards that policy that I just mentioned, the student search checklist. The student search checklist is currently utilized on the district student information system, which is Synergy, and the physical form is no longer in use. Due to this, the form was recommended for deletion, and the committee agreed with the recommendation. The third item that we reviewed was JICH, drug and alcohol use by students. The assistant superintendent advised that the term vaping be added to the prevention education section and that the committee adopt other MSMA suggestions. The committee agreed with the recommendations and adopted the changes, which have been included in your packet this evening. The committee also made non-substantive stylistic edits, and that is on the agenda tonight for first reading as well. The fourth item was JICH-R, the student drug and alcohol use administrative procedure, which is the corresponding administrative procedure for the above policy. There were minor changes to this rule that were brought to the committee for its review, and since it's an administrative procedure, no vote was conducted, and the amendments have been included in tonight's packets for the board's awareness. The final policy that we amended was JICH, our bullying policy. The committee amended the district's definition of bullying to include the term making false accusations. The committee asked Ms. Napolitano to review any law or court actions surrounding student retaliation and due process rights. Her findings were discussed at the policy committee meeting conducted earlier today. And this bullying policy is on tonight's agenda for first reading.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments for the Policy Committee? Seeing none, Mr. Carlo, do you have anything further to add for first reading?
No, I have nothing further to add for first reading items.
Okay. Are there any questions on the policies for first reading? I do have one question. Looking at JICH, it's great we have a policy for students. Do you know what our policy is on the same use for staff?
There is a separate policy for staff harassment. I'm not familiar what the code is, but I'm aware of the policy.
Talking alcohol and drugs or just
Yep.
harassment? Alcohol and drugs, yeah. I usually remember this.
Okay.
I guess there is one.
Very good.
I'm going to defer to Ms. Napolitano. She's currently looking up the code.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Moving on to second reading and adoption. Mr. Carlo.
The Policy Committee has not reviewed any of the policies that are set for second reading tonight.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve the policies as presented?
I'll move that.
Moved by Mrs. Anderson, seconded by Mr. Sargent. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? It is unanimous. Upcoming Board of Directors meetings and workshops. Thursday, December 3rd, we have a virtual Budget Advisory Committee meeting at 6 o'clock. The Zoom link is attached in your agenda. And on Monday, December 7th, we have a Policy Committee meeting at 4:30 and a regular board meeting at 6 o'clock. Now entertain a motion to adjourn.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you have that
It's-
information?
Yeah, it's GBEC, Drug-Free Workplace. That covers that. GBEC is Drug-Free Workplace Policy.
very good. Thank you. Mr. Moran?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In thinking a lot about the vote of item number 12, the nurse vote for the testing, I've changed my mind and I'd like to be on the record of changing my abstention vote to a vote of yes. If that's permissible.
I do not believe it is. I believe we would need a motion from somebody who voted in the majority to reconsider at this time. Okay, we have a second from Mr. Sargent to reconsider item 12. Record shows that both voted in the affirmative on that motion. All in favor of reconsidering item 12. It is unanimous. And now voting again on the item. All in favor of adopting number 12? Opposed? 2 opposed. Thank you very much. Now we'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved by Mrs. Bruni, seconded by Mr. Sargent. All in favor? It is unanimous. Thank you.